I call Jackie Dean.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I'm very pleased to stand to the third reading of the Animal Welfare Amendment Bill. And when I was contemplating what I would say in my contribution in this third reading, I always go back to my electorate, which is a large southern rural electorate, which is a big producer of a number of commodity products which are duly exported overseas. And that led me to thinking about an occasion when I was in Hong Kong and I was taken to a wet market in Hong Kong and then a dry market in supermarkets to have a look at primary produce, particularly at New Zealand beef and lamb at the time. And I was very kindly chaperoned around by a local gentleman who was an importer of New Zealand beef and lamb product and a local representative of Beef and Lamb New Zealand. And so we went from the wet markets, which are very, many tourists go to the wet markets because you see chickens being slaughtered right there and concrete floors and people go to the market and buy each meal because of the culture and they like the freshest of food. And then on to the supermarket to where New Zealand beef and lamb, in particular lamb in this instance, was packaged for Hong Kong consumers, as it is packaged for Singaporean consumers and European consumers, wherever it is in the world that New Zealand produce, Chinese consumers, wherever we export our animal products. And a couple of things struck me, and I reflected on a couple of aspects which I think relate to this bill, Mr Speaker. One of them is that the context around the meat product, and it was lamb in this case, was that maybe the offering on sale was a package maybe twice that size, and there were little slithers of thinly sliced lamb, and that was being sold. And I'm going, gosh, that doesn't look like a leg of lamb, which is what I'm used to buying or growing. But it is the form in which the Hong Kong consumer goes to buy the lamb for the dinner that night, and it might end up being a hot pot, which from memory is one of the dishes that our lamb is put to. So I noted the differences in expectations of different markets for our product, but I also noticed when I was looking at the labelling, New Zealand sells itself not only on having a wonderful environment and a clean, green environment, which I have to say this government is doing a lot to enhance. You see, so there we have the opposition, because they're the opposition and they can only think to oppose, destroying. Well, let me say to that member of the opposition that this government has done much more to enhance the quality of our environment, in particular water quality, than any. In fact, if I recollect, the Labor government in the previous term had their water plan of action. Anybody been around here for a while remember the Labor's water plan of action?
Order.
Well, it was so bad. It was so bad that ministry officials out of the Ministry for the Environment called it, this is the officials, termed it in public the water plan of inaction. And I'm relating this, thank you, Mr Speaker, I am relating this to the bill because our international reputation in terms of quality, while we do have some parties in the House who would seek to destroy New Zealand's international reputation, this government is working very strongly to enhance our international reputation, and this animal welfare bill certainly adds to our reputation. And I know that when speaking to some of our vets, for example, in and around the Waitaki district, they have long been concerned, particularly those who are involved in the export export markets and service the farmers and farming operations and freezing works that export internationally, are absolutely aware not only and support not only New Zealand's efforts and enhancement of our environmental reputation, because this is New Zealand Inc. after all, but are also very fully aware of the need for us to maintain our reputation in maintaining good animal husbandry standards, and I believe we do. What I've also seen over the years around particularly the Waitaki Valley with the expansion of dairying as a result of irrigation, another wonderful initiative of this government in supporting the development, not only supporting it, but providing incentive funds and R&D funds for the development of irrigation, which is increasing productivity, which is increasing jobs in the regions, and particularly I want to zero in on the Waitaki Valley because we now have irrigation from the top of the valley up at Otamatata.
This is our third reading, Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And what that has meant is that we now have dairy farming expansion along the main road. And when you have dairy farming expansion along the main road, the travelling public, both visitors and New Zealand citizens alike, get to see farming operations up close. In fact, people will often stop and park their cars and take photos of dairy cows and sheep when they can find them. There are less sheep down my area than there used to be. But one of the consequences of having dairy farming on show is that animal husbandry, as of necessity, needs to lift its game consequentially, not just because it can be seen from the main road and it's New Zealand's reputation at stake, but also farming has lifted its game substantially over the past few years, and that's just in my observation. I didn't sit on the select committee that considered this bill. I know a number of members here did, so I haven't had the opportunity to fully scrutinise this bill. But I am pleased that one of the objectives of the bill is to provide for clear and enforceable standards of animal welfare. And in that, I do hope attention was paid to the growth of small holdings and hobby farmers in New Zealand because, and I think federated farmers have often raised the point, is that small farmers also need to have a high standard of animal husbandry. It may not be that they are exporting, probably not. The likelihood of small farms exporting are probably pretty low, but nonetheless, even if those animals are being raised for home kill or on-farm killing or sending down to the local abattoir to be killed and then dressed at the butcher and then sent home again, which is what we used to do when we had a small farm, the level of animal husbandry needs to be maintained by that sector as well. I did a visit to Alliance Freezing Works Pukuri plant some years ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago, just as the local MP, because I was interested in the export of lamb, and they tried to play a trick on me at Pukuri. We went right up to the top of the chain, and it's quite a long trek from the bottom where they are cutting up with the saws. They're cutting up the cuts, and you walk all the way up back to the kill. This is a halal plant, and so the sheep were killed very humanely. In fact, no idea what was coming, so very humane kill, and then they proceed down the line. And I could see them looking at me, local Sheila turning up. Who does she think she is, the local MP? I know, we'll get her. So as the sheep was coming down the line, it came time to top the sheep's head off, and what they did was they popped it on the ground looking at me with the hope of me going, oh, isn't it awful, it's a sheep's head. Well, little did they know, we've been involved in home killing down on the farm for 20 years or so by that stage, so that didn't work. But I have to say that I know a lot of the freezing workers out at Pukuri, which is probably why they played the trick on me. But I have to say that I know Pukuri Freezing Works very well. I also know Silver Fern Farms up at the northern end of my border. I've met with the management, I've met with the freezing workers. They do uphold the highest standards of animal welfare because they have to. They understand for the animal's sake it's important, but also in terms of our international reputation and our export markets, it's critical. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Members, this debate has expired. The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it.
Animal Welfare Amendment Bill, third reading.
Call on Government Order of the Day number 3.
Social assistance portability to Cook Islands, Niue and